There you go. Alright, so what are your thoughts on having art houses become part of a college campus?
Well, I think right now it's very difficult on many levels. First of all, the art house is something that really took hold in the 50s and 60s when there were really movies coming from France, from Italy, and you had a variety of possibilities. When was the last time you saw a foreign film playing in your local theater? There might be 1, 2, maybe 3 in the entire year. We have a couple of multiplexes in New Jersey, and they're struggling because the clientele that they have are people that are, you know, baby boomers and older. So your generation are not going to the movies to see art pictures. They're downloading everything for free, or they're getting access to stuff without having to pay much through Redbox or Netflix. So art houses really mean that there has to be some kind of a non-mainstream film. And it's very, very difficult to get an audience for those, especially amongst students. You've come to our film festival. Our film festival used to be a second-round art house. I would book films that played in New York and Philadelphia and didn't make their way to Central Jersey, and we were able to maintain an audience that way. And we survived because we didn't have to pay for the overhead, and we didn't have to pay for the rental of the space. We had to pay for the machines, for the projectionist, and we had to pay for the cleanup and things like that, but those were nominal costs. So the biggest problem is really the audience. And since it's going to be based at a university, it depends on the university. Maybe Princeton could pull it off. And they do have their own theater downtown on Nassau Street. The Garden Theater is theirs. They own that. The great thing about that is it's not on campus. Because when it's on campus, you don't get first dibs for films. Normally a distributor will only give to a place that will play films all day long for a week on end, weeks on end. And usually a university will play 1 night a week, 2 nights a week, 3 nights a week for one show. So you're going to have to wait for everybody to play it before you do. And then by that time it'll already be on home video. And most people have beautiful widescreen home theaters, and they can set it up for peanuts. Why should they spend $10, $20 for 2 people to go see a movie where they can see it almost for nothing at home? So
you said most film distributors won't distribute their film unless they're playing for multiple nights, but at the NJ Film Fest they play for 1 night at a time. So
we're a little bit different now. You see, we're no longer what we used to be. We used to book a film and we'd show it 3 nights. And yes, we would be the last to get that film after the art houses because we were at the bottom of the feeding chain. But because the home video release has shrunk, 10 years ago a film would come out in the theaters, 6 months later it would be out on home video. That's great because then the theater would pretty much finish playing it in 3 months, so you could show it 3 months later. Now, with the video release, a movie is already out the same time it's in the theaters with video on demand, streaming. So it really has changed the whole idea of what we do. So now we're a year-round film festival, and people pay for the privilege to show at our festival. So there's an entry fee. They pay anywhere from $45 to $75, depending on their length of their film, to just be judged. And if you get 200 or 300 films, you can do the math, you make money that way. Well, you don't really make a lot of money, as you can. We're not Sundance. They get 4,000 or 5,000 entries. We get 300 if we're lucky. So, you know, you have that income, so you no longer have to pay for a rental. And if you only get 30 or 40 people at the screening, you're still making money. So you could survive doing that. But I think renting films that are out there and that have already a marquee value because they've been reviewed in the New York Times or in a major paper, and there's advertising budget behind them, they want money back for that. So it became for us, well, why do we really want to do that? Wouldn't we rather show films before anybody else has access to them? And so we're premiering films, we're making money doing that, and you know, it's cost effective. Now again, if we had to pay for the space, and we also had to pay for the office and the telephone and the heating, we wouldn't survive. We wouldn't be able to do even that because there's expenses associated with everything that we do. I mean, I take a salary, but if I told you how much I made, you'd laugh. I mean, I haven't gotten a raise in 12 years, and when I first started doing this, I did it for free for the first 10 years. But then it became where it was 40 or 50 hours of my time a week, that I needed to get something in exchange for. I needed to live too. So from the amount of money that I make, you know, you would probably have somebody else making double what I make in a really nice situation where you were really able to generate a lot of income. But that would only be in a huge city or in a place that really is attuned to the art community. Even San Francisco doesn't even have any art houses anymore. I was very shocked. They have the Castro Theater, which is really tied into the gay community, and they'll do programming for them, but it's not what it used to be either. They used to do the same kind of thing that the Film Co-op did 10 years ago.
So with art houses dwindling and with movie theaters kind of like losing power in this society, how would you recommend for an independent filmmaker to go about distributing their films and trying to build a name for themselves?
It's really interesting because now anything goes. When I started making films, there was a network. There was a loose community of independent filmmakers, and it depended on the type of film you wanted to make. I was an experimental filmmaker, so that was the smallest of the smallest niche. And you knew everybody in the community, and there would be places that would show your work. They were subsidized by the National Endowment for the Arts, and the federal government would provide support for artists to go from venue to venue, so that the venue itself wouldn't really lose any money by bringing you in, and you'd get 20 or 30 people, they'd make no money. But because they got the grant, and because they wanted to try to provide a venue for emerging artists and for experimental artists, they did this and they didn't have to worry about losing money. That was gone. That whole program died in the mid-90s, where the Republican right-wing agenda was to squash any federal money for the arts, because they didn't figure, well, why should we give money to the artists? You know, they thought it was a waste. But artists really thrived on that and needed that to be able to work, because there's no real income generated by selling your work. I mean, if you make Avatar, you're going to sell millions of copies. You know, Maya Deren's films really still to this day don't make that much money, and she's like the experimental filmmaker in this country, at least one of them. So if she was alive, she'd still probably be starving because she's not making enough money off of her project. So what do I tell an emerging artist to do? Well, you certainly don't put it on YouTube. Certainly don't give away your work for free, because then you'll never make any money. You might want to put the first one out there just to kind of whet people's appetite to show that you have a vision, but at the same time that might sell yourself short. So I think the best thing to do is to try to enter festivals, get a name for yourself, make a short 5-minute film, no more. Don't be arrogant enough to make a 90-minute film and think that an audience is going to sit still for it. It may be a great 90-minute film in your eyes, but it may also need heavy editing, like most first films that I see, and I see 1,000 films a year, easy. And I see so many talking about the same thing, you know, why did my girlfriend leave me? These kind of adolescent angst films, remakes of horror movies, or Star Wars types of sci-fi films. Those are young kids. They take their influences and they regurgitate them. That's okay, but that's good for family and friends. I wouldn't submit that to festivals or try to get that into the mainstream. Once you think you have something original, and I wouldn't get my stuff out there until I had something original, then you want to kind of keep it close to your vest. An emerging artist should have access to a lawyer. There's a lot of sharks in the water, and there's going to be people that are going to try to steal your ideas and steal your work in many ways. So one of the first things I always tell my students is to take a film workshop with a lawyer. We offer one, and he does it for nothing, and he represents a lot of big names. And it's all about making sure you protect yourself, because a lot of kids are naive and they don't realize you're shooting in somebody's house, you don't get a release, that person can turn around and sue you down the road once you become famous.
Right.
So there's a lot of legalities that a young filmmaker should also have access to. So that's one of the most important things that I would say right away: get access to a lawyer, somebody that you trust that would be able to guide you through the obstacles that are out there. The third thing I would say, after showing at as many festivals as you can a short work that you think is very original, and having a lawyer, is then to use that work to submit to get money to make another film. There are granting agencies out there. There are a lot less than there used to be when I first started making films. But you can get support if you're not a full-time student to make your art. You know, so long as the Republicans don't cut that, you'll be okay. And you never know, because they wanted to cut the NEA. That was one of the things that they were talking about cutting, along with the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. They're all lumped together because they see them as vehicles for the liberals, which is not true. You know, a lot of the filmmakers I know, they're, you know, middle of the road. Some are Green Party people, some are liberals, some are conservative. So they're really kind of a demographic that they should consider supporting. Anyway, so once you have the grant, then you can make another film and not spend your own hard-earned cash. You want to make a film that's, let's say, mainstream, and you want to get into the Hollywood vehicle. I would say go and work on somebody's film. Don't even consider making it. Try to work your way up the ladder. A fellow who I knew as a student here at Rutgers, he said, I'm going out to Hollywood, I'm going to make it. And you just have to put in your mind that you want to do that, and you'll suffer. A lot of people suffer. I mean, think of Madonna. She was poor as hell when she was first starting. And, you know, she would take her clothes off, and she would do movies, you know, that she probably wouldn't do now in the same way, just to get a name out there. I think for young filmmakers, they have to think about the ramifications of doing something where they sell out. It can't come back to bite them, you know. So this one guy who went out, he started cleaning garbage cans at Robert Altman's office. He sent his resume out to everyone, and they hired him to be basically a janitor. He got promoted pretty quickly. Somebody left in the mailroom. So then he started delivering mail to all the different people in his office. Got to know them all. That lasted for another year. There was another opening, and he slid in working in the post-production facility for one of Prince's movies. And then after that, he ended up meeting Wes Craven, and then he was working on scripts for him. I've lost track of him. I don't know what he's doing now. But, you know, it's much easier, in my opinion, to go that route. Other than that, you would have to go to film school, and you would need to use that 5-minute or a couple of little short films to try to get you into film school. Yes, you'll have to pay a lot of money if you want to go to the Big Five, which are NYU, Columbia, the American Film Institute, UCLA, and USC. Those are always considered the Big Five. But you're going to end up paying $20,000, $30,000 a year. So you'll have that debt to deal with. But, as I always say, talent is probably the thing that you need the least to get into Hollywood. You need to have contacts and money.
Very true.
You know, if you have those two things, you're in good shape. The talent is also helpful. But as you can see, a lot of movies that are out there are not that good. And there's a reason for that. So, I mean, in a nutshell, I would say to a young filmmaker, if you really want to make it happen, say you want to make it happen, and educate yourself as you go. And little by little, things will fall into place. There'll be lots of obstacles. It'll be how you deal with those obstacles that will make or break you as a filmmaker. I mean, I made films for 20 years, and I thought that I could grow into moving into the feature film arena. And there was a fellow who was kind of keeping an eye on me, had a lot of money, and he had optioned a very famous short story, science fiction short story, and he liked my film style. And he hired me, but I realized he was a liar. He lied at every turn. He lied at every turn. And after 6 months, I realized I was not going to work with this guy on this multi-million-dollar project. And because of that, I said, I'm pulling out. He threatened to sue me for damages because I was pulling out. I never signed any document with this fellow, so I'm not an indentured servant. But I didn't know that as a young man, and I was a little intimidated by all that. So I think you need to have obstacles, how you deal with them, and you need to bounce back from them, because there will be tons of them out there. And so good luck to everyone out there. And I think if you have any doubts and you don't want to starve for a good part of your young life, this is not the field for you. If you don't care and you want to make it happen at any expense, get ready to eat a lot of peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and hang in there.
All right. I think that's the perfect place.